Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everybody. Today we're diving into a world that you might not think about every day, but it's actually a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff, actually.
We're talking about regenerative blowers, and we're going to be taking all of our insights from the Regenerative Blower Market Report 2025 Global Edition that was put together by Cognitive Market Research.
Great report.
Yeah, and our goal today is to really cut through the data,
Yeah.
all those numbers and charts and stuff,
Yeah.
to figure out like what's really going on in this global market, where it's headed in the future.
Yeah, where are things going, right?
Exactly. So before we get too deep into it, let's just make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
When we say regenerative blower, what exactly are we talking about?
Okay, so think of it like this. You know those fans that you have around the house?
Yeah.
Well, these are kind of like industrial-grade fans, but way more sophisticated.
Okay.
They're all about moving air, or sometimes gases, but they do it in a really efficient way.
Good.
So unlike your average fan, these are built for really tough jobs where you need a constant stream of air without, like, wasting a ton of energy. They're kind of like the behind-the-scenes heroes of a lot of industrial processes.
Right. And this report tells us that in 2025, this market, this global market for regenerative blowers, is going to be worth an estimated $1,124.6 million US dollars.
Ah,
That's a lot of blowers.
that's a big market. Yeah.
But here's the thing. By 2033, it's projected to climb even higher to $1,446.89 million. And it's growing at an average annual rate, that's called the TAGR, of 3.20%. So this isn't just some like niche industry that's staying the same. It's actually got some serious momentum behind it.
It's a growing market for sure.
All right, so let's start breaking this down. And I think the first thing we should look at is where in the world are we seeing all of this activity?
Yeah, good point. The regional breakdown is really interesting right off the bat.
Right.
As of 2025, North America is holding the biggest share of the market, over 40% actually.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, and that translates to about 449.84 million US dollars. But here's the thing. Their projected growth rate over the next 8 years, it's more like 1.4% per year.
So they're the big player right now, but it sounds like their growth is a little bit slower compared to some other regions.
Yeah, it's a bit more measured, you could say.
Okay, so where's the excitement happen?
Well, Europe's the next biggest player, holding over 30% of the market.
Wow.
That's around $337.38 million in 2025, and their growth forecast is a little stronger, 1.7%. But the real story here, the real growth spurt, is happening in the Asia-Pacific region.
Asia-Pacific, always a region to watch. What's going on there?
It's booming, quite frankly. Right now, Asia-Pacific accounts for about 23% of the global market, with a size of 258.66 million US dollars. But get this, their projected annual growth rate is 5.2%.
Wow, that's a big difference.
Yeah, it's significantly faster than any other region, and it's not just about more factories being built. It's about these economies, these rapidly developing economies, investing in really modern, efficient infrastructure. Technologies like regenerative blowers are a big part of that, that upgrade process.
So it's like they're kind of leapfrogging ahead in terms of technology, and that's driving that growth.
Yeah. Exactly. And the report actually breaks it down even further, giving us some numbers for specific countries. For example, China's market is estimated to be $108.64 million in 2025, with a 4.7% annual growth rate, while India is at $31.04 million, but they've got an impressive 7% yearly increase.
Wow.
Yeah, and Southeast Asia as a whole, it's just a hotbed of activity right now, with a 6.2% growth rate and a market size of $17.85 million this year.
So definitely a region to watch. Okay, so we've talked about North America, Europe, Asia Pacific. What about the rest of the world? What about Latin America and the Middle East and Africa?
Okay, so Latin America's got a little over 5% of the global market, sitting at 56.23 million US dollars in 2025. And they're looking at a projected annual growth of 2.6%. And countries like Brazil and Argentina, they're the big players there.
Okay.
And lastly, the Middle East and Africa, they represent about 2% of the market. That's estimated to be around $22.49 million this year, and their growth rate is 2.9%.
Okay, so slower growth in those regions.
Well, within the Middle East and Africa, actually, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries in South Africa, they're showing a slightly faster growth rate.
Got it. So there are some pockets of faster growth there.
Yeah.
It sounds like this global push for energy efficiency, it's a common thread across all these regions.
Yeah.
But it's really gaining traction in those, rapidly industrializing economies.
For sure.
Okay, so now let's move on and talk about the different types of regenerative blowers.
Right.
Because the report talks about this segmentation by product type, like what are the main categories that are out there?
Right, so the report tells us that positive displacement blowers, also known as PD blowers, they're the ones leading the pack right now.
Okay, PD blowers. And why is that? Why are they so popular?
It's interesting, actually. Imagine a device that basically traps a fixed amount of air and then pushes it out, forces it out.
Okay.
That's kind of the basic principle. And this mechanism gives you a really consistent, high volume airflow at a very steady pressure.
So it's all about that consistent flow.
Exactly. And that's really important for things like wastewater treatment.
Oh, right. To keep those oxygen levels consistent.
Precisely. Also, it's great for pneumatic conveying. Have you ever heard of that?
I have. Tell our listeners a little bit about it.
Yeah, so think of it like using air to move materials like powders or grains through pipes in a factory.
Okay.
It's really common in industrial settings. And PD blowers, they're the workhorses for this, because they're just so reliable.
So it's kind of like their bread and butter, those applications.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But with all this new technology coming up, I mean, is there anything out there that might challenge the dominance of these PD blowers?
Oh, absolutely. This is where the innovation gets really exciting. The product type that's showing the fastest growth right now is the high-speed turbo blower.
High-speed turbo blowers.
Yeah. And these operate on a completely different principle. They use centrifugal force to move air, so it's kind of like a super powerful fan.
Got it.
And the biggest advantage here is their energy efficiency.
Ah, so they're more efficient.
Way more efficient, and they also offer higher performance.
And I bet they require less maintenance, too.
You got it, spot on. And all of these factors make them really appealing for those large-scale industrial applications, especially where even small gains in efficiency can result in major cost savings.
Yeah, so PD blowers are the kings right now, the go-to option. But it sounds like these high-speed turbo blowers are gaining ground fast.
Yeah, they're definitely ones to watch.
Okay, so the report also delves into this breakdown of the market by pressure levels. Like, what's the significance of that? Why does that matter?
Right, so when we look at pressure levels, the largest segment currently is classified as high pressure.
High pressure, okay.
And this actually ties back to those dominant applications we talked about for PD blowers, like that pneumatic conveying, moving those materials, wastewater treatment.
Yeah.
These often need a really strong, consistent airflow, and high-pressure blowers are perfect for that.
So it's all about having the right tool for the job, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
So if high pressure is the biggest segment now, where's the growth happening in terms of those different pressure levels?
Well, this is kind of interesting. The fastest growing pressure segment is actually medium.
Medium, okay. Why is that?
They seem to hit that sweet spot when it comes to versatility. They're being used more and more in material handling, different kinds of aeration processes, not just wastewater treatment and even pneumatic conveying, but in less demanding scenarios.
So they're kind of like the multi-tool of the blower world.
Yeah, exactly. You can use them for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And that adaptability across various industrial settings, it's really fueling their growth.
I see. So medium pressure blowers, they're becoming a popular choice for a wider range of applications.
Absolutely.
All right, so we've talked about the regions, the types of blowers, the pressure levels. Let's now focus on who exactly is using these blowers.
Yeah, the end users.
Yeah, what does the report tell us about the different end user industries?
So the biggest end user segment right now, the one that's using the most regenerative blowers, it's water treatment plants.
Water treatment, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, because if you think about it, those plants need a constant supply of air to keep the biological processes that clean our water running smoothly. And they need it to be efficient.
Right.
So regenerative blowers, they provide that reliable, energy-efficient airflow that's needed to maintain those oxygen levels. And their reliability is a huge plus for those plants because, they can't afford any downtime.
So it's a critical part of their operation.
Absolutely.
Okay, so water treatment is a huge user. But which sector is seeing the fastest growth in adopting these blowers? Like, who's really jumping on the bandwagon?
This might surprise you, but it's actually the aerospace and defense industry.
Aerospace and defense. Wow, that's not what I was expecting.
Yeah, it's kind of unexpected, but if you think about the really demanding conditions in aircraft, things like ventilation, fuel systems, air compression, it starts to make sense.
Okay.
Regenerative blowers can offer high efficiency in a small package, which is really important when space is limited, like on an aircraft.
Right, every inch counts.
Exactly. And they require minimal maintenance, which is also crucial in aerospace applications.
So it's all about that efficiency and reliability.
Yeah, those are the key factors driving their adoption in the sector.
Fascinating. Okay, so beyond those two big sectors, are there other industries that rely on these blowers?
Oh, tons of them. The report highlights a bunch of other important sectors, including cement plants, steel plants, mining operations, power plants.
Wow, it's a long list.
Yeah, the chemical industry, oil and gas, food processing, even pulp and paper manufacturing.
So basically, any industry that needs to move air or gases efficiently.
You got it. Regenerative blowers have a role to play in all of them.
So it's clear that this technology has a very wide reach across the industrial landscape.
For sure.
Okay, so we know who's using these blowers, but how do they actually get them? Like, how are these blowers sold and distributed?
Good question. So the report tells us that right now, the most common way these blowers are sold is through what they call offline channels.
Offline channels, what does that mean?
Basically, it's the traditional way of doing things. Think of direct sales forces, distributors, retailers.
Got it. So more like face-to-face interactions and relationships.
Exactly. And this probably reflects the fact that a lot of these key industries we've been talking about, they've been around for a long time.
Right, they're more established.
Yeah, and they often prefer that direct contact with the distributor or the manufacturer so they can get that technical support, customize their equipment, and get help with installation, especially for those bigger, more complex purchases.
So it's about that personal touch and that expert advice.
Exactly.
But is the trend towards online sales, is that happening in this market too?
It is, and it's happening fast. The distribution channel that's experiencing the fastest growth is online.
Online. Okay.
And this is just part of a bigger trend we're seeing across pretty much every industry these days.
Right. Everything's moving online.
Exactly. Online channels give buyers a lot of convenience. They can easily compare different products, look at the specs, and often find better prices. So it's becoming more and more attractive, even when you're talking about big industrial equipment.
So even in this, kind of specialized industrial niche, the online marketplace is making its mark.
It definitely is.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second and look at the big picture. What are the major factors that are driving the growth of this market? And what are some of the challenges it's facing?
So the key drivers, the things that are pushing this market forward, they include this growing global awareness of environmental sustainability and a bigger focus on air quality control.
So it's like people are more aware of the environmental impact of their choices, including their industrial choices.
Exactly. And regenerative blowers are often seen as a more energy efficient option compared to some older technologies.
Right, which is good for the environment and good for the bottom line.
Precisely. And the increasing use of these blowers in those wastewater treatment plants we talked about, that's also a major factor driving growth. And then, of course, there's just this ever-expanding range of industrial uses, like in pneumatic conveying and ventilation across all sorts of different industries. So it's a lot of things coming together.
Okay, so it's that combination of environmental consciousness and the practical benefits that these blowers offer.
Yeah.
But what about the roadblocks? What are some of the things that are slowing this market down?
Well, one of the main hurdles is the initial cost of investing in regenerative blowers.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're probably not cheap.
They can be a significant investment upfront, even though they can save you money in the long run because of those energy savings. So that initial cost can be a barrier for some companies.
Especially smaller companies, maybe, with tighter budgets.
Yeah, potentially. And the other issue is that some types of regenerative blowers, they can generate some noise and vibration.
Right. I can see how that could be a problem.
Yeah, in certain operating environments, that can be a concern.
So those are understandable challenges. Balancing those upfront costs with the long-term benefits, and then figuring out how to manage any noise issues.
Yeah, it's all part of the decision-making process.
Okay, so last but not least, let's talk about the overall trends that are shaping this market and what the competitive landscape looks like.
All right, so one of the big trends we're seeing is, as we've already touched on, the increasing adoption of regenerative blowers in industries that are really focusing on improving their energy efficiency and their overall sustainability.
So it's like a win-win situation,
Yeah.
right? Good for the planet and good for their business.
Exactly. And then there's this growing demand for quieter and more compact blower designs, which is directly addressing those noise and space concerns we mentioned earlier.
So manufacturers are listening to those customer needs and trying to innovate.
Absolutely.
Okay, so who are the big players in this market? Who's making all these blowers?
Well, the report describes the market as being very competitive. There are a lot of companies out there, and the key players, they're really focused on innovation.
So they're constantly trying to come up with new and better designs.
Yeah, they're trying to develop more energy efficient solutions, lower maintenance solutions, and they're tailoring their designs to the specific needs of different industries.
So it's not just one size fits all.
Yeah.
They're really specializing.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you've got a lot of strategic moves happening, like mergers and acquisitions.
Oh, right, like companies buying each other up.
Yeah, or forming partnerships, all to expand their market reach and gain new technologies. The report even mentions some examples. Like Airzen, they launched a new super efficient turbo blower series a while back, specifically for wastewater treatment.
Okay.
And then you've got Atlas Copco. They acquired a company that specializes in compressed air and gas treatment.
So they're kind of buying up the competition or buying up complementary technology.
Exactly. And then there's Xylem. They introduced some new water and wastewater technologies in Singapore. So it's a really dynamic and evolving market.
It sounds like it's a really exciting space to be in if you're in the blower business.
It definitely is. A lot of opportunities out there.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of information in this deep dive into the regenerative blower market. Let's take a minute to summarize the key takeaways for our listeners.
Sure. So the main points to remember are, first of all, this is a big market globally, valued at over $1 billion US right now, and it's projected to keep growing steadily in the coming years.
So it's not going anywhere.
Nope, it's here to stay. And while North America and Europe are currently the biggest players, Asia Pacific is the region that's leading the growth charge.
Right, that's where the action is.
Yeah, and we talked about the dominance of positive displacement blowers right now, but those high-speed turbo blowers, they're catching up fast.
You're the up-and-comers.
Yeah, exactly. And when we look at pressure levels, high-pressure applications are still the biggest segment, but those medium-pressure applications are expanding the fastest.
So another area to watch.
Definitely. And in terms of who's using these blowers, water treatment plants are the biggest users right now. But aerospace and defense, that's the sector showing the most rapid growth.
That's the one that surprised me, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting trend. And lastly, while the traditional offline sales channels are still the most common, those online channels, they're gaining ground quickly.
The internet is taking over everything.
It really is.
So to sum it all up, this growth that we're seeing in the regenerative blower market, it's being driven by a few major factors. That increasing global awareness of environmental concerns, the desire to be more sustainable,
Yeah,
and the practical operational benefits that these blowers offer, like that energy efficiency.
absolutely.
But the market also has to overcome some challenges, like those high upfront costs and those noise considerations that we talked about.
For sure.
And it's really interesting to see how those fastest growing areas, the Asia Pacific region, the high-speed turbo blowers, those medium pressure applications, the aerospace and defense sector, and those online distribution channels, they're all kind of pointing towards the future direction of this market.
Yeah, they're the ones to watch.
Absolutely. So as we wrap things up here, I want to leave you with something to think about. Given how important sustainability and energy efficiency are becoming across all industries, how might the future of regenerative blower technology not only improve those existing industrial processes, but also maybe even create entirely new and unexpected applications, things we haven't even thought of yet?
Yeah, it makes you wonder what the future holds.
It really does. And how this technology could contribute to a more environmentally responsible future. That's something to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
We'll catch you next time.
See you then.